longest time, there was nothing.
Hello and welcome to the community review of The Monkey.
The good. 1.
The Monkey isn't just scary, it's mean. From start to finish, this movie drips with tension, pulling you into its nightmare and refusing to let go. Based on Stephen King's short story, it takes a simple, eerie concept and turns it into a relentless, blood-soaked descent into terror. The film doesn't waste time with cheap jump scares. It builds dread the right way, long, quiet stretches of pure anxiety before it slams you with horrifying, graphic violence. And when it hits, it hits. The gore is vicious but never over the top just for the sake of it. Every brutal moment feels deliberate, like a cruel inevitability rather than mindless carnage. The cast delivers solid performances and they truly make you believe the fear, the desperation, and the unraveling sanity. The cinematography and sound design deserve just as much credit. This film looks incredible. And the monkey symbols? Yeah, that sound will haunt you. If you love your horror bleak, intense, and unrelenting, The Monkey delivers. It's not just another spooky doll movie, it's a nasty, unsettling, and expertly crafted nightmare. Not for the weak, but for horror fans, this one's a must-watch.
2.
The Monkey, 2025, is the latest movie from Osgood Perkins. It was also produced by James Wan and based on the short story by Stephen King. On paper, these things should work for me, and they M0st definitely did. Positives for The Monkey. This movie is basically the horror comedy version of Final Destination, where every death scene is some of the most gruesome stuff I've seen in a horror movie, while also being hilarious. The movie does a spectacular job at balancing its serious tone with all the silliness of the death scenes perfectly. You also have great performances from the cast with Theo James, Tatiana Maslany, Christian Convery, Colin O'Brien, Rohan Campbell, Sarah Levy, Adam Scott, and Elijah Wood. Theo James is especially great as the main lead, and he continues to prove me wrong with projects like this, The White Lotus and The Gentleman. There is a great usage of practical effects with some CGI that works perfectly. The movie moves at a quick pace that doesn't let the audience rest for 1 second. And finally, this movie has a very rewatchable factor that have me come back to this movie. Mixed for The Monkey. The ending is the main thing that will divide audiences' viewing experience on this movie. Thankfully, it did work for M by the end of it. Overall, The Monkey was a wild ride with an insane tone, great performances, and awesome kills. I highly recommend this movie to horror fans everywhere.
3.
After finding Longlegs very underwhelming, I didn't quite know what to expect from The Monkey other than that I thought the trailers looked solid. It might not reinvent the wheel from a horror perspective, but it is very entertaining with a tone that I found to be very satisfying. It never takes itself too seriously, and that works for a premise that is inherently goofy. It is laugh-out-loud funny in how deadpan the humor is, and as someone who loves gory, over-the-top violence, this fulfills that quota perfectly. It is also a bit more wholesome than I expected it to be, with a father-son story that worked surprisingly well. It isn't a flawless ride. There's a prologue that went on for a lot longer than I expected, and it ended up wearing out its welcome quite quickly for me. The film can also be a little bit repetitive with all the gruesome death scenes that do start to feel very similar to each other. After not really liking Osgood Perkins' last film, it's pretty safe to say that The Monkey is a massive step up in almost every aspect. It has a clearly defined tone that it completely commits to, and it's frequently hilarious because of that. I still don't quite know what to make of Perkins as a filmmaker, but it's good to know that he is capable of delivering horror of this quality.
4.
I went to this film at the cinema, and it was one of the funniest horror films since it. I didn't find it scary or as a horror, but more of a comedy with regards to the deaths. If you don't know what I mean, look at the Saw deaths and Final Destination deaths. The reason I found it funny was because of the deaths, as I have said before. They were so exaggerated that it was hilarious. There were subtle nods to Final Destination, in a sense of you could see what was going to happen. My sense of humor is pretty dark anyway, and I laughed at every single death and was not disappointed. The detail they went into for the deaths was really good. The eyes and the ears on the wall from the cannonball. I would definitely see this film again, just because it was funny. Yep, a solid 8 out of 10 because there could have maybe been a little more. What that little more is, I don't know.
4.
A captivating blend of comedy and horror. This film delves into profound themes surrounding death and humanity's relentless quest to control the unpredictable nature of life. I found myself thoroughly entertained by its thought-provoking messages, and the storytelling had that unmistakable charm reminiscent of classic Stephen King adaptations, echoing the nostalgic tone of Stand By Me. This particular movie draws inspiration from a lesser-known short story of his that I had the pleasure of discovering, an intriguing narrative brimming with vivid gore and dark humor, creating a truly unforgettable viewing experience.
The Bad. 1.
I read the Stephen King short story in anticipation, which was a bad idea. The narrative is used more as a springboard for the further development of the concept. Don't get me wrong, I'm all on board for this expansion of the short story. I love the idea of the totem object that could possibly be a deity or a god of some sort, and how it follows the brothers into adulthood. What I was sold was not what I got. I would say it compares to the use of the monkey drum toy for the poster of the film Monkey Shines, 1988, by George A. Romero. Which is to say, they have nothing to do with each other. One is used to sell the other, and it's misleading. I blame the trailers. The monkey, in terms of a film, is closer to a real bloody version of The Cable Guy, 1996, or Very Bad Things, 1998. If you go into the film expecting the tense horror/suspense of Longlegs, you'll end up a sad monkey. As I walked away from the film, I think I would have really enjoyed it if it was marketed more as a dark comedy, and sure, some of this blame is on me as a viewer to do my research. As it stands, if you've seen the trailers, you've already seen 90% of the suspense in the film. What you haven't seen is the absolute mayhem and chaos that surrounds those situations. I think the first 10 minutes of the film tells you exactly what it is, how the humor works, and how it plays out through the monkey. If you're on board with the opening, it's a perfect roller coaster. My problem was that I thought I was on a roller coaster and instead ended up tripping on a bunch of banana peels. Regardless, I think the film is worth viewing, and to continue using animal innuendos, you might find it a hoot. But in the end, the film is just monkeying around
2.
with the audience. I went into The Monkey without high expectations. The trailer made it look like one of those generic horror movies that rely on jump scares and a ridiculous premise. And yeah, the premise is silly. A monkey bangs a drum, someone dies. But instead of a serious horror film, you get an over-the-top horror comedy that tries so hard to be funny that it eventually gets in its own way. The movie actually starts off well. The first deaths still have some shock value, the characters are entertaining, and there's a bit of that Final Destination appeal where you're curious about what's going to happen next. But very quickly you realize, there's no real tension. Every death is just a setup for a joke. The first time it's funny, the second time too, but by the 8th time someone randomly explodes, and the others just shrug it off within you, it gets old. And that's the problem. The film mocks horror cliches, but doesn't offer anything thrilling itself. Scream proved that you can perfectly blend horror and comedy by keeping both elements grounded enough. Here, every serious moment is immediately undercut by a dumb joke. Even themes like the strained father-son relationship or the threat of the monkey carry zero weight because nothing in the movie has real consequences. The second half starts to drag. The jokes repeat, and at some point, the film just feels like a series of TikTok skits where people die in the most absurd ways possible. The ending is the lowest point. I won't spoil it, but it feels like the writers had no idea how to wrap things up, so they went with the cheapest and dumbest option. Is it a bad movie? No. It's entertaining if you just want to turn off your brain and enjoy some absurdity. But it could have been so much more if it had taken itself even a little bit seriously. As it is, it's a fun idea that eventually runs out of steam.
3.
3 friends and I were really looking forward to this movie for months. After Longlegs, it was clear they were pushing Oz to be the next Spielberg, but for horror. I just walked out of the theater and got home, and boy, this just was not a good movie at all. I knew and expected camp and comedy, but this had a few funny scenes, but there was zero tension and scares to balance out the lame attempts at getting a chuckle out of the audience. The story, no spoilers because there barely is a story. It's a killer monkey. There's no hint at what's really going on, there's no lore, there's just a guy who has a killer monkey problem. And I was really hoping this one would land, and in the end, all it did was send me him a sad monkey. My 3 friends also did not like the movie, not even a bit. This was a huge misfire by Oz. Will it make money? I heard the budget was $10 million, so it has a pretty good chance, especially with the advertising and the hyping up of Oz. But for me, the next Oz movie that comes out, I'm waiting a bit to see how it lands.
4.
Right from the start, you can tell how you'll feel at the end of the film. You either love or hate this movie. There's no in between. The movie is too goofy to work as a horror movie, and it's too serious to be a dark comedy. There are horrible tonal shifts throughout the entire film. This actually feels like someone tried to write Marvel humor into a Stephen King movie. By the way, that based on Stephen King works is a total disappointment. No single recognizable traits from his works can be seen in here. There's a kind of twist at the midpoint, but it's there just for shock value and totally inconsequential. The worst part of this slasher is that all the deaths are so complicated yet so boring. What a waste of time.
5.
I understand that it's supposed to be a more fun type of horror movie, but for it being a Stephen King/James Wan movie, I have to say I expected more. It was nothing but clips the whole movie. There wasn't a single part in the movie where actors actually acted for more than 3 minutes. I thought the movie just used gore to cover up the fact that it's not a good movie as far as storyline/plot and acting. Sorry, not sorry.
Critic. 1.
Because the monkey arrives so soon after Longlegs, it's difficult not to compare the two. Longlegs had an original screenplay written entirely by Perkins, and while the film took notable inspiration from Silence of the Lambs, it was heralded for Perkins' ability to use thorny themes to build out a distinct, dread-filled framework. Longlegs had a lot on its mind, from how humans weaponize religion, to sexual abuse and the way trauma plays with the memory, not to mention a whole lot of Satanism. With the monkey, Perkins seems to be careening in the other direction, going far more literal with his depiction of humanity's capacity for evil. Perkins has spoken about taking liberties with the story, bringing in his own notable experiences with horrible, headline-making death. His father, actor Anthony Perkins, died of complications with AIDS, while his mother, Barry Berenson, died in the September 11th attacks. Perkins sought to depersonalize tragedy, so he could make a movie that continually emphasizes that death is a thing that happens to everyone. Sometimes it's clean and easy, other times, someone gets trampled by wild horses. But by depersonalizing death and making it into a rote spectacle, Perkins loses any heart that could give his film the resonance it so desperately needs. Unlike similar franchises confronting the inevitability of death, the monkey approaches that certainty with a shrug. We're all going to die, so we might as well get used to it. Might have some level of truth to it, but that messaging is wholly counterintuitive to an already disconnected world. Sure, we're all going to die, but just because it's destined doesn't mean it's not still deeply sad. That melancholy provides critical nuance to our lives, keeping them from being pointless in the face of sure annihilation. Without elucidating those necessary subtleties, the monkey, no more value than the glib words of comfort whispered by a family friend who only came to the wake for the free food.
Have you watched this movie? What are your thoughts? Leave your opinions down in the comments section. Thanks for watching.